Welcome back to the Changemaker podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. My guest today is Nicole Jansen out of San Diego by way of Canada. Transformational leadership coach, business advisor, facilitator, speaker, and host of Leaders of Transformation podcast, which I had the pleasure of being on. Nicole, welcome.
Welcome to the Changemaker podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Thanks for having me, Deke. I'm excited to be here, and I know we're going to have a great conversation. We've already been talking for a while here.
I think we already did the show while it was not recording. But for our listeners, just tell them a little bit about yourself and how you ended up doing what you're doing, because you've been doing this for 30 years now.
Yes. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial household, and my parents were both really big dreamers, and they worked hard, and they had a lot of integrity and ethics and responsibility. And so that combination was a great breeding ground for me, if you will, and growth opportunity for me to see how they showed up. And then I just kind of followed in that process. And so I started working with them in their business, and then started my own business when I was 16. We built a very successful business. I actually ended up spending more time in the business where I was partnering with them than my own after a while, because it grew so dramatically. And I thought honestly that that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And God had other plans because that business is no longer. And it fell apart due to a lack of leadership or poor leadership. Let's put it that way. There's always leadership, but it's the type of leadership. And so I just started off right again from scratch. I was in my mid to late 20s, and I was like, well, how did I end up here? Built an 8-figure business, thought it was done, and here I'm starting over. And so I really took all of what I had learned in the process and thought, how can I help others to avoid going through the same experience that we just went through? And as I started doing that, and I started doing workshops and trainings and so forth, I had people that would come to me and say, can you coach me? Mm-hmm. And initially I'm like, I'm not a coach. I mean, I was thinking therapist, back in the day. And as they kept asking me to mentor them and to coach them, I started doing that and I started to agree to do that. And then realized I had been doing this like for years, and just never called it that. But it was really about empowering people. It was about looking at what their strengths were and how they could use their strengths in a business to make an impact. And I believe that business is about making a difference, creating so much value in the marketplace that the marketplace wants to pay you back. So it's very mission driven. And I learned that, like I said, from my parents.
It's funny. And we talked before coming on air that this week I signed up my first executive coaching client, but he reached out to me. He's CEO of a nonprofit in Atlanta, reached out to me 2 weeks ago. And I said in our first conversation, I said, I can't tell you that I've ever officially done executive coaching, but I can tell you, I wrote a book about it basically, and I've been doing it for years. But he said, what would set you aside from another executive coach? I said, to be realistic, I've seen so many coaches and consultants that have never actually done it. They're teaching based on theory as opposed to based on experience. But I've sat in a leadership seat, in many leadership seats, and I know what it's like, the pressures and everything associated with it. So I think you need a peer. So that effectively, and I want to get into this, 16 years old, you started your first business. That is so awesome. But I talk a lot about it. Change-making leadership is about being willing to take that leap of faith. And so a 16-year-old starting a business, that's a big leap of faith.
Yeah, at that time, it didn't feel like it. It was a natural thing for me because I was already helping my parents in their business. I was already helping in a somebody else in their business and just doing a lot of the back end work. So it was a natural for me. And I always hung out with people that were older than me. So
Mm-hmm.
I've always been kind of maybe an old soul or whatever, right? So, for me, it really didn't seem that unusual. Looking back, I realized, wow, there's not too many 16-year-olds that go out and start selling stuff door to door. They don't do that, but not very many. But we are a product of our environment. My dad, and both of them, my parents were immigrants. My dad owned garage businesses. He got an opportunity to buy a business. He actually he came to this country in Canada with I think he said $80 in his pocket, and 3 days later had $20, and he thought, I need to get to work. So he started working really hard, and then somebody gave him an opportunity to buy a business and help fund it and so forth. And that was how he got his start. And then my mom helped him in the business. And so they were working 7 days a week, full on. And, and then, as I said, started another business, which I started to work with them on, a direct sales business, which was all about helping, empowering other people. So it was kind of to me, it didn't seem that unusual at that time. And we are a product of our environment. So leadership to me starts in the house. It starts with when people, and I've done a lot of second generation entrepreneur, training, teaching the parents how to work with their children, because a lot of times kids have no idea what their parents do for a living, and people don't tell their kids. Right? It's like dad's going off to work, mom's going off to work. They're not connected to it, right? And so it's no wonder, even if it's a business, it's no wonder that the kids don't have a passion for it, or maybe even see it as kind of like the enemy, because it's taking mom and dad away from me. Whereas my parents just involved us in everything that they were doing, and so it was just a natural progression. And so we just wanted to be involved.
That's reminds me of my wife, Melissa. So she went to work for her father, who had started a lifestyle center and had other businesses and rental properties right out of college. And he taught her the business. So they've got, the most successful lifestyle center in Augusta, but you can just tell she's taken it and grown it since he passed in 2015. And I've always said, your dad taught you well, and he would be so proud of you. But that really mentoring her and teaching the business was so important. And I do agree, leadership begins in the home. And I wish more parents would really mentor their children.
Yes. Yeah. Don't abdicate to a school system to do that, because you have just so many opportunities along the way. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. And I think about, it dates me. I'm sure you were probably in the same situation, but I remember if I got in trouble at school, it was double when I got home. And so now so often it seems like there are parents, and I don't want to stereotype, but there are a number of parents where it's like, well, not my angel. And I'm like, my dad trusted the teachers. And if I got out of line, I mean, that was hell to pay when I got home.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't get into a lot of trouble at school. My brother did. And I learned from him. He was older. So I remember thinking, mental note to self, don't do that, or at least don't get caught. Because there would be, my dad was, I wouldn't say a disciplinarian, but we learned authority and we learned responsibility. And, when I was in my teens, even, I always thought, now, of course, we had started to build this business that was growing. And so I couldn't go anywhere in the city where I wouldn't know somebody or run into somebody that knew me. And so I grew up with this thing. It's like, I'm a Jansen, right? So when I do something, it reflects back on our family name. Yeah. And so I just learned that early on, that it's like, it causes you to raise your standard when you think about it. And I think of the quote that says, character is caused when there's no applause. Like when you develop character is in behind the scenes, but it is, when you're out in public, who you're being reflects that, and reflects your, like I say, with your family, it's to me, I was like, I didn't want to do anything to tarnish the family name, and
Yeah.
I learned that young, because to my parents, her name was honor. It meant something. And as I
Hmm.
said, I learned that early on from my parents in the way that they operated, not just what they said, because it really wasn't what they said. It was really who they were.
Yeah. And I learned the same thing in my home. And people would ask me when I was in office, why do you not just go ballistic and raise Cain with your colleagues? And I said, my dad taught me to behave as a professional. And I don't care if, I'm in politics, I'm going to behave professionally. I'm not going to behave the way that you think a politician should behave, because that's compromising my character. And I'm not going to compromise my character to please you. And I think that's what I've often said. And you brought up character, that you see it in business and you see it in politics. I've seen people that I know run for office, and I see their campaign ads and I'm like, that's not the person I know. But you see the same thing in business. And I've said, if I have to compromise my character to get ahead in business or in politics or in anything else, I don't want to get ahead.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting when I think back to times, opportunities in business where I had the opportunity, and this we were talking about earlier about the marketplace. My passion is the marketplace, and why in business, because that's where everybody is. And when you think about the opportunities that we have to cut corners, to do
Mhm.
things because it's going to benefit us, and nobody's going to know. I mean, what's the big deal, right? But it is a big deal because of what it does, not only what it does, in terms of when people find out or all of that, but it actually what it does to you.
Mhm.
When if I do something that is out of integrity, I'm the one who's impacted, even if no one else knows,
Yep.
because of what it does. And so deep down inside, I know the truth. Deep down inside, my confidence is going to be diminished. My self-esteem is going to be diminished because I know who I'm being. I know what I did. And I think right now, when we look at a lot of the leaders, a lot of times we see this emptiness, and there's like this void of character, there's this void of integrity, and they're bashing each other and all this stuff, like when you talk about, certainly about in politics, but even in business, it's like competing and all of this, scarcity mindset. And I think a lot of it really does come down to integrity, and it comes down to who we believe that we are, and and it's the being, right? The be leads to the do, leads to the how, the have. And so it really does start there. And I don't think people realize the impact of that. When I stopped, even little things like you're at a networking event and somebody says, "Oh, let's do lunch," and you think, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah." In your mind, you're thinking, never, like, no way in hell are we going to do that, right? I have no interest in hanging out with this person again. Or like, "Oh, yeah, sure, I'll call you. My people will call your people. Ha, ha, ha," right? And then it doesn't happen. Even those little things that we do are out of integrity with what is our truth is, right? And so, and what it means to be in integrity. If I know that I don't want to do that, I'd be better off actually just being right up front with that and saying no,
Exactly.
or thank you for the invite, but whatever. But it's the little things, and then it's the big things, and so when we can come back into alignment, I think one of the important things about leadership is coming back into alignment. Leadership is not just about leading others. Most people think about, I want to be a thought leader, and I want to be a change maker, and I want to be I don't want to be seen as a change maker. Right. Well, before you are seen as a change maker, why don't you just forget that goal altogether and just be a change maker? And it starts with you. It starts with you, how you are with yourself. That's the first step of leadership. And that's when I was talking about responsibility and so forth with my parents. I learned I watched how they led themselves. And out of that, how they led others, mentoring and encouraging. They were always encouraging people along the way. And so, of course, it was natural for me to do that as well. but it starts with us, being in integrity with ourselves, leading ourselves well. And then we have earned the right, if you will, to lead others.
Exactly. Well, it's talking about starting in the home. I remember, so I was born in Canada as well, was born in Montreal and moved to Augusta when I was 4 years old. So my father was the CEO of a fertilizer corporation, and my father had grown up on a farm and loved to garden. So when we got to Augusta, he ordered a load of compost, and the people that sent the compost left a brand new wheelbarrow with it. And I thought, I'm a 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid. And I'm like, well, that's the nicest thing. We just moved to this new town and somebody's given my dad a wheelbarrow. And my dad sent it back. And I was kind of incredulous at that point. I thought, when somebody gives you a gift, you're appreciative. But my dad sent me down and said, look, once you start taking things from people that you don't know, it's a slippery slope. And so I did that for my 9 years in office. I bought my own gas. I've paid for most of my own travel expenses. And fortunately I had the wherewithal to do that. But I thought that's what, once you start compromising your integrity, it is a very, very slippery slope.
Oh yeah. I remember a guy who came to me and said, I want you to coach me in my business. I said, what is your business? He says, I build adult entertainment clubs. And I said, well, good for you. I'm not your coach.
Yeah.
And he said, why not? I mean, I'm going to build all these. I'm going to be, I'm successful already and blah, blah, blah. And I said, that's great. But I only take on clients that, because when I work with you, I'm like partnering with you without officially being a partner. And I'm partnering with you and I'm putting myself in that space of, if this were my business, what would I do?
Yeah.
And so again, we're talking about integrity, right? It's like, no, I'm not going to do that because of what it will, doesn't matter how much you're going to pay me, of what it'll cost me in the long run. And
Exactly.
Of course, reputation, all that, but forget all of that. Just what it would mean to me to go every day or every week to work with somebody to support something that I don't believe in.
And that's what I always say, is that in all my business endeavors and everything I do, it's got to be mission first and money second.
Yes.
And if I'm just doing something for the money, I don't want to be doing it. But really, to me too, leaders set the tone, and there are great examples of where a good business and a good business model and integrity can be very profitable. I always use Chick-fil-A as an example. What Truett Cathy built there, and I grew up thinking, well, how much more money could they make if they were open on Sundays? But they stayed true to his faith and his principles. And, look at the success that Chick-fil-A has had. There's a hotel where my wife and I are now staying in Charleston called Hotel Bennett. So it's a 5-star hotel, opened up a couple of years ago, was named, I believe, the best new hotel in the world. Well, you can just, they do hospitality better than anyone I've ever seen, but it's authentic. It's the employees genuinely. The reason we go there is we can take our dogs. They're pet friendly. So we have 2 corgis and then we have a lab mix, but they are rock stars there. I mean, everybody's so excited to see them. So we met Mike Bennett, that's the owner of the Bennett, and we discussed, Truett Cathy and what he did with Chick-fil-A. And I said, you obviously have created an environment here where people want to come to work, and we started going in February of last year. There's been relatively little turnover other than people being, promoted within the organization. I'm like, that's another example of, running a business in the right way can lead to great success as well.
100%. I believe there is a generosity multiplier, and even if we're talking about integrity, that applies too. It's like there's an integrity multiplier. So when you do the right things in the right way and you're generous and you put mission first before profit, then what you do is it's like you unlock this opportunity to multiply so much greater. The scripture in the scripture in the Bible talks about seek first the kingdom of God and all of the things will be given unto you. Mm-hmm. And, what is the kingdom of God? Well, the kingdom of God is, what are the qualities of it? Is like love and peace and unity and generosity and kindness and so forth. And when we demonstrate those things, what we're actually doing is we're unlocking the abundance. We're coming from that place of, I have more than enough. I'm sufficient, right? And I can share rather than being stingy. Because you attract who you are, not what you want. So if you're stingy, or you're out of integrity, or you're doing things, just all for your own benefit, then, it says so much about you. And then of course you're going to attract more of that. People are going to be stingy with you. I remember one of my mentors who talked about the story of his mentor when he was starting out, and he was struggling with people being stingy with him and not wanting to pay his full rate and all of this stuff. And he said, if people are being stingy with you, ask yourself, where are you being stingy with you? Where are you being stingy with others? Because you're attracting who you are,
Yep.
not what you want. And so it's counterintuitive, right? But the more you give, the more you receive. But you don't give with the manipulative, intention of saying, okay, I'm going to get from this person. You may not get from that person. It may come from somewhere entirely different, but you trust, you trust that it will come back to you. And even if it doesn't, I look at my parents, we've talking a lot about them. My parents built a very successful business and had, like I said, big dreams and goals of doing all these wonderful things. At the end of their life, that business, when it fell apart, they lost everything, and they never quite recovered financially. And I remember my parents one time, both of them at different times, saying to me, I feel bad because we didn't leave you an inheritance, a financial inheritance. Would have been nice, but the reality is, I said to them, I said, no. I said, the inheritance that you left us was far more valuable, because I would take having parents who were together, that worked through the difficult seasons and, stuck together and were more loving and kind to each other in their later years and then their beginning years. To have parents of integrity. I don't ever have to look over my shoulder. I don't have to think about who you screwed over. I don't have any of that. I know you operated from integrity, not perfect, but operated with intention and integrity, being generous, loyal and so forth. That legacy that you left was far more valuable than money. So even if you don't get, all of it back in financial wealth and so forth, what you get is you get it in much different ways. I remember after my dad died, he would always encourage young people. They just loved him. And people of all ages, but he'd tell the young people, like, so you're renting. Why are you renting? Why don't you buy your house? And so this guy, one of the gentlemen who he had worked with towards the end, came to me and said, when I met your dad, I was renting my house, and he encouraged me and said, oh, you can buy a house. You can do it, right? Why don't you get some investment properties and start building it and so forth? And he had done that. And he said, he changed my life. I'll never be the same. I'd still be renting today. And now I own multiple properties and I'm building, this legacy for my family. But I wouldn't have done that unless your dad had encouraged me. And other people would say, people that said to me, I used to call your dad on Father's Day because I saw him as a father to me. My brother at one point, he used to always say, you're my number one son. And my brother would say, I'm your only son. What are you talking about, Dad? And it was only after he passed and all of these stories started to come out and how many people said he was like a father to me, that he realized that was actually true. You are my number one son. But he had a lot of sons. He had a lot of people that he encouraged along the way. And some people were his age, and older, yeah. But he just was pouring that out. And that was worth far more than any bank account.
And truly, change-making leadership is always focused to the big picture. And I'll give you an example. When I was in office, I took every opportunity I could to go read to kids. And I remember somebody asking me, why do you constantly go into schools? Because kids don't vote. And I said, well, yeah, but they should know that they have a mayor that's concerned for their health and welfare and their future. So the first time I spoke in a church was in 2005 when I was running a Baptist African American church. And it was just the reception was wonderful. But several years ago, I got to be friends with a young lady named Kim Stewart. I met her through Leadership Augusta. I was a mentor in that program. So she read my book and she wanted to go to lunch. And over lunch, she said, you talk about coming to Macedonia Baptist Church and what that meant to you. She said, I was 18 years old when you came, and I never cared anything about politics or local government. And that night you became my man. So now she's in her early 30s and she's married. She's a leader in the community herself. And I thought that just means the world to me. But if you're just looking to win an election, okay, why am I going to waste time, going into schools? But just looking at those future generations. But I love that your dad, that's a perfect example of leadership.
Yeah. Reminds me of, I did a workshop. Working with kids is awesome. There's a gentleman that I had on my show not that long ago, Chom Kolditz, and they work with, he is running the Dura Institute at Rice University, and they're developing new leaders and have a real passion for that and big goal to, develop 1 million new leaders. But at the university levels, they're giving away coaching and training, leadership training to the university students there that want it. And working with young people is just so amazing. I remember one of the most rewarding, and I've worked with thousands of people and successful people and all that, but one of the most rewarding moments was when I was doing this workshop, and it was for this young group of girls, 11 to 16 at-risk youth. And I did this workshop, and one of the girls came up. She's about 14 years old, and she came up. I was teaching them about DISC personality and who they are and why that, they're different and why that's a good thing, and just really building them up and building their confidence. And she came up to me afterwards, and man, I still today, I just think about that moment. And she said to me, when I grow up, I'm going to remember you. And I was like, if that's it, that's all, like if I just had that to take away from this day, it was worth it. And it was worth all of the workshops just for that moment. And it's not because what she was saying is not going to remember you because you're that great and whatever, because of what it meant to her and how it changed her life. Man, it's nothing better than that, and you can't orchestrate that. And that's what I think a lot of times leaders try to do, is they try to orchestrate, or even like social media influencers try to orchestrate that. You can't orchestrate that. It's who you are being. Just be the best version of you, lead yourself well, and then you'll have those stories, but you don't look for those, you know what I mean? You don't orchestrate and coordinate those stories. They actually show up on their own. So it's the give just because you want to, share just because you want to, encourage just because you want to, because you're pouring out of your heart, because that's what you want to do, and that's your mission, and it'll come back to you in so many multiples.
I pray in that way every day. I remind myself, I'm like, Lord, it is not my physical appearance, nor my possessions, nor my perceived position in life that connects me to people. It's the spirit that you've placed within me.
Amen.
And help me to always remember that. But it's just to open up to people and connect with them. You're right. It's a good thing to do. It's a nurturing thing to do, but you've got to be authentic. And as you said before, and particularly with younger generations, they've been marketed to their entire lives. I mean, the BS meter that they have built into them, if it's not authentic, they don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. More now than ever. There's a complaint about millennials and why they ask these questions about, why should I be doing that and so forth. But these are actually really good questions, and they bring so much insight and value when you think about why are we doing the things that we do, and they are looking for that authenticity, and we can learn a lot from them, and just realizing, and truthfully, don't we all want that? Don't we all want to just be real and be ourselves? I mean, we've got a world right now of people that just want to self-express. They want to be seen, they want to be known, they want to be heard, right? And to be acknowledged. And so if we can create spaces for them to be acknowledged, to see the best in people, we often judge people by their faults, by their mistakes. But if we start looking at what's great about this person, you will find what you look for. Seek and you will find. So what you focus on expands. And so if you focus on the negative, if you focus on the things that people are doing wrong, then you're just going to see a lot more of that. Your filter, your lens in which you see the world, and the RAS, the reticular activating system in your brain, there's literally that thing that is actually going to filter in what's important to you and filter out what's not, is going to dial into the negative, But if you look at the great in people, and like on my social media, I say, believe in the greatness in people and not their weaknesses, then you'll see a lot more of that. And there's a lot of great people doing a lot of great things like you. And if we focus on that, then I think we're going to be in a lot better place, and we're going to leave a lot better world for the next generation.
I agree completely with you. And I've shared with people, I just personally, and I think the majority of people feel this way, I don't want to hang out with angry, negative people all the time. And I think, that social media can feed that. But now that, the world is, for now, opening back up again, I've missed human contact and just being around people and hanging around them. I love doing the podcast because I get to have good conversations. And I think people are hungry for the nurturing things that they can learn from, and that there are takeaways. As far as the negative and the anger goes, we've got plenty of that. So really my focus is, and we talked, and I want to get into this, about the call that the Lord has put on my life. It's really to bring people together on common ground with every platform I have to do it, whether it be around the book, whether it be around a podcast, speaking engagements, because I think people don't want to be made to feel afraid. They want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves, and they want to be empowered, which is what you're doing.
Absolutely. And you bring up that call. I believe that all of us have a call on our life. There's a lot of talk right now about what's my purpose? What's my purpose? What's my purpose? And, I sometimes will say to people and say, you know what, I can answer that for you right now. Here's your purpose. We all have the same purpose ultimately. And that is to love God and to love one another as ourselves. There you go. There's your purpose. Now, how you do that is going to be unique based on your passion, based on your strengths, based on the call on your life, right? The experiences that you have. It'll be unique how you do that. But we are all called to do that. And isn't that what we want? We want to love and be loved, bottom line. And so if we can agree on that, I think about it's like every single person around the world all wants to really be loved and to be loved, and they want to love, and they want to create a good life for their loved ones and the people they care about. So we can all agree on that. Now, how we get there, that's where we got to work out the details, right? But if we can start with that point of agreement and that focus, then we can make a lot, because you talked about earlier, it's that bigger picture. So it's not about me. It's not about what is this going to mean to me? What is this going to do for me and mine and my family or my bank account or whatever? And you step back and you look at the bigger picture and you see, like, what am I here for? I'm on this planet for however many years, 80, 100 years, right? I want to live to 100, and so it's like, we're here for a short time. What are we going to do with that? And then, I do believe that God calls us to a specific assignment. And so one of the best things someone can do is to find out what that assignment is, what they're called to, and just do that. Don't try to be somebody else just because they see you and you're running for office. Now, I do know a lot more people that are starting to step up because they don't like what's going on. And so they're actually stepping into office as well. They're feeling called to it. But just because you see someone else do it doesn't mean you need to. And that's where it comes back to knowing who you are and being in integrity with who you are. Be the best version of you. You want to be a change maker? Be the best version of you. Be a great, I said to one of my mentors years ago, I said, I always wanted to be an example. He says, oh, Nicole, you're always an example. The question is, what kind of example are you?
Very good point. And that's the thing to me when I decided to run for office, and I talk about leaps of faith. I mean, doing a podcast is now a leap of faith for me. Publishing my first book was a leap of faith. But I remember people saying, why do you want to get mixed up in all that? And I'm like, well, I know one thing, if nothing's ever going to change if somebody doesn't try to change it. And so I think it's scary, but sometimes leadership is just actually doing what nobody else wants to do.
Yeah. And it's often, it is scary. The calling that we have in our life, if it doesn't, you think, oh, that's my calling, and it doesn't scare you, it's probably not your calling. Your calling is going to be something that is going to scare you. And it is going to be like, you know what? I don't really want to do that. I mean, quite frankly, I don't like, I'm an introvert by nature, like you, right? We're kind of, I mean, you talked about that before, and hey, I'd be happy, just hanging out, doing my thing and going to the beach or whatever the case is. Going and speaking on stages or putting myself out there isn't necessarily my natural inclination. It was for my dad, but it's not my natural inclination. But if that's what I need to do to be able to make an impact, then that's what we do. That's what I need to do. And so I do it from that standpoint. And it actually helps because I never get confused that it's because of me, and it's not me. Get myself out of the way. And so I can just show up. It's like, God, you told me to be here. So give me the words to say, show me, guide me, and it's because of you, and it's because of your grace and your power working through me. Ultimately, my goal is to be a pure vessel so that he can just work through me. It's like less of me, more of you. You get all the limelight, and I don't need all that. I don't need to be rich and famous, and all of that. I don't need all of that. If it comes, great. But it's really more about doing what I'm called to do. And I hear that in you, and it will make you uncomfortable. He's always going to stretch you. God is always going to stretch you outside your comfort zone. Because if he doesn't take you outside your comfort zone, it's going to be all you. He's got to take you outside the comfort zone, so it's beyond you.
I'll tell you, I always pray for the Lord to help me confront my fears, whatever those may be. And the Lord answers your prayers, not always in the timing that you want to. But my wife and I were down at the beach a couple weeks ago with another couple, and a couple that live in Hilton Head where we were invited us to go out on a dinner cruise. So they picked us up at 6 and low tide was at 8. So we go back in the creeks and everything. Well, we get stuck on a sandbar and had to sit there. So it's 8:00 at night. We were there for 2 hours. Like, one of my greatest fears is to be in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the night. So it was completely dark. Fortunately, the temperature was not awful and the bugs weren't really bad. But I know, and I spoke to my friend who's a doctor about it, the girls were getting a little concerned. They're like, do we call the Coast Guard? I'm like, there's nothing we can do. We jump out of the boat. We're trying to rock it off the sandbar. But it in situations like that, I'm like, I'm just so calm. It just, when I was in office and I'm like, Lord, here you put me, stranded me and 5 other people on a sandbar at night when there's heat light in the distance. This could go really bad really quickly, but you gave me that sense of calm. And so you helped to show that I can face my fears.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I think one of the ways that the reason why we suffer a lot during life is because we resist things. We resist facing the fears. We resist stepping out of the boat or stepping out of our comfort zone, if you will. And we just realize that, that's part of life. That's how we actually grow, is we stretch. And it's like training, you go to the gym, you don't build muscle, if you just do what's easy. You've got to stretch your muscles. And in the same way, in order to grow, in order to make an impact and be everything that you're created to be, you got to stretch yourself, And so, it's funny when you talk about the boat and so forth. And I think about, okay, so you're on a sandbar. Yeah, bad things can happen. But you know what? This tide goes out, tide comes back in again.
Yep.
And how many times is that, we look at even the last 18 months, the tide went out and people freaked out. And it's like, you know what? You got to just trust. That's where faith comes in. Tide's going to come back in. This too shall pass. And I've been through some difficult things in my life. And it's like, I just keep reminding myself, this too shall pass, and there's better days are ahead. And it's what you say to yourself in those moments, and, that make all the difference, and speaking life, speaking hope, speaking love. Our words, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, life and death is in the power of our tongue, right? Our words have creative power. And so what do we say in that moment? What do we say every day to ourselves? When the doubts come in, the fears come in, how do we respond to that? Do we resist it? Do we fight it? Do we embellish it? So often I find people will globalize it, right? And then when something really good happens, they'll minimize it. I got lucky.
Yep.
This is a state, but this is a statement of my life. Why does this always happen to me? That's always about the negative, right? And so it's flipping those things around and saying, you know what, I can do this. This is not a statement of my life. This too shall pass. I think is really important. So speak life.
Well, Nicole, we could talk all day and all night, and so I would love to have you back on the show. You've just been a pleasure to talk to, and as I say, I'm sure our listeners will get plenty of takeaways from your wisdom that you've provided. But for the listeners, where can they find you?
Sure, they can go to leadersoftransformation.com. That's my website for the podcast. And also there's a page on there for coaching, and they can contact me through there. And if they are interested in having a conversation about a specific area that they're dealing with and want some insight, then they can even book a free consult with me. So it's all there, leadersoftranformation.com. And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. And
I always enjoy talking to you, though. And that's the thing. As you say, there's a tribe out there of people who really want to see the world come together and want to work together to do great things. And I tell people I'm just an old hippie at heart. I'm just trying to unite the tribe, which I think is what you're trying to do. But it has been a pleasure getting to know you through these calls and podcasts. But thank you for being my guest.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Dropping the mic, and we are out.